Creation is religion and evolution is science, is what we're told. But is evolution really science?
This week on Creation Magazine Live, is evolution pseudoscience?
Welcome to Creation Magazine Live. My name is Richard Fangrad.
And I'm Calvin Smith.
Now, this week on Creation Magazine Live, our topic is evolution pseudoscience?
Right. Now, the Skeptic's Dictionary contains an entry on pseudoscience that includes 10 characteristic fallacies of pseudoscientific theories. So today, we're going to see if any of these 10 criteria describe evolution.
Okay, all right. Now, just to be clear, we'll apply these criteria to molecules to man evolution,
Right.
not natural selection or genetic changes over time that lead to variation within a kind. Scientists observe those things, but they have nothing to do with evolution, since the type of change they produce does exactly the opposite of what evolution requires.
Right. Now, it's also clear that the compiler of that list had biblical creation in mind, since he keeps attempting to show how creation fits the definition of pseudoscience rather than science.
Right, yeah. Now, we'll freely admit, as we have many times, that creation isn't science, it's history. Mm-hmm. It's a true account of the history of the universe. Since science has to do with things that can be observed and tested and so on, creation is outside the realm of scientific investigation.
Right.
So a bit of a straw man argument there to start off.
Right. Well, here's a list of the 10 criteria. Let's go through it. 1, some pseudoscientific theories are based upon an authoritative text rather than observation or empirical investigation.
Number 2, some pseudoscientific theories explain what non-believers cannot even observe.
Number 3, some can't be tested because they are consistent with every imaginable state of affairs in the empirical world.
Number 4, and this is very similar to number 3, they're so vague and malleable that anything relevant can be shoehorned in to fit with the theory.
Number 5, some theories have been empirically tested, and rather than being confirmed, they seem either to have been falsified or to require numerous ad hoc hypotheses to sustain them.
And number 6, some pseudoscientific theories rely on ancient myths and legends.
7, some pseudoscientific theories are supported mainly by selective use of anecdotes, intuition, and examples of confirming instances.
Number 8, some pseudoscientific theories confuse metaphysical claims with empirical claims.
Number 9, some pseudoscientific theories contradict known scientific laws and use ad hoc hypotheses to explain their belief.
And number 10, the last one, pseudoscientists claim to base their theories on empirical evidence. They may even use some scientific methods, though often their understanding of a controlled experiment is inadequate.
Right. So there's the list of the 10 criteria. Ironically, evolution has almost every characteristic on this list. Let's look at how evolution exhibits the fallacies listed by these, so self-proclaimed skeptics.
Right. Now, by the way, today's show, like most of our shows, are based on articles from Creation Magazine. Creation Magazine is our flagship publication, goes out to over 100 countries all around the world. It's a fantastic faith-building resource that has helped thousands of people all around the world come to see that God's Word is accurate without twisting the text to make it say things that it doesn't say.
Absolutely.
The magazine also shows how the latest scientific discoveries wonderfully support the Bible's account of creation and other historical details throughout Scripture. Many key articles have been digitized and are now available on our website, and you can read the article that today's show is based on if you go to creation.com/pseudoscience.
Okay, so number 1 on the list is that pseudoscience is based on an appeal to some authoritative text. It's an appeal to authority. Never mind the evidence, just trust this great authority type thing. Well, in almost every debate about origins, one of the first arguments given by the evolutionists is an appeal to authority.
Yes.
For example, the National Academy of Sciences flatly asserts that While the mechanisms of evolution are still under investigation, scientists universally accept that the cosmos, our planet, and life evolved and continue to evolve.
All right, so it's almost like we're supposed to respect these scientists because science has proven to be so powerful that just because you're involved in science, it suddenly makes you an authority on what happened millions of years ago. But it doesn't. Evolution, like creation, is much more about history than it is about science. And no scientist was there millions of years ago to observe or test anything.
That's right.
So appealing to scientists as if they have a better handle on what happened millions of years ago, rather than non-scientists, just reveals a misunderstanding of the nature of the origins debate.
Right, but the people who preach evolution, they didn't discover gravity or pasteurization or semiconductors. They
Right.
just call themselves by the same name, scientists. So they confuse people into thinking that, well, evolution is just like medical science that leads to curing diseases or the kind of science that's advancing technology, and it's not.
Right, yeah, so number one on the list of criteria to describe pseudoscience certainly describes evolution. And we'll look at the next one after a short break.
Have you ever wondered what sort of evidence would convince an atheist that the universe was designed? Scott Todd from Kansas State University gave a startling answer. Even if all the data pointed to an intelligent designer, such an hypothesis is excluded from science because it is not naturalistic. Well, candid admissions like this show us that some people will reject a designer no matter what the evidence. But recognizing design has long been a part of science. When an archaeologist finds an artifact like a piece of pottery, he knows immediately that it was designed by someone, even though he can't see the designer. So if design has no place in science, archaeologists are in serious trouble. Forensic science, who killed who, is also about recognizing the evidence of intelligent agency, proving that it was no accident. But when the evidence in science points to God being the intelligent designer, never.
To find out more from Creation Ministries International, visit our website, creation.com.
Well, if you just tuned in this week, we're contemplating a list from a skeptical website of 10 criteria of pseudoscience and seeing how many of these criteria actually fit with evolution.
Yeah, it's ironic that skeptics aren't skeptical about evolution, isn't it? They're evolution believers who generally gloss over the massive scientific problems with evolution.
Right, we're the skeptics.
We're the
actually.
skeptics, yeah.
We're skeptical about evolution, so we have scientists and researchers investigate the claims evolution believers make, only to find that believing in evolution is actually a blind faith.
Right, yeah. It takes a lot of faith to believe in evolution with so much evidence against it.
Right.
But let's continue with our list. Let's get back to the list here.
Right. Well, number 2 on the list is some pseudoscientific theories explain what non-believers cannot even observe. So does evolution fit this criteria?
Okay. Well, the website of the U.S. Department of Energy admits that no one has observed evolution happen in nature or in the laboratory. But it explains, as for the fact that we haven't made evolving life in the laboratory yet, I think that you're expecting too much of your species. It's a bit of a weird term. Let's say, as a first guess, it took blind nature 1 billion years to make evolving life on Earth. How much faster do you want us to go? Even if you give us an advantage of a factor of 1 million speed, it would still take us 1,000 years to catch up.
So the answer is that it's totally unrealistic to expect to actually observe evolution, even under artificially accelerated conditions. Well, it sounds like they're saying that they believe in evolution without observing it.
It sure does.
Yeah.
And I think it's time once again to haul out one of our favorite quotes by Richard Dawkins, who's professor of zoology at Oxford University, who said, "Evolution has been observed, it's just that it hasn't been observed while it's happening."
All right. Okay, so evolution fits criteria number 2. It seeks to explain what non-believers cannot even observe. Actually, even evolution believers can't observe evolution.
Right. Number 3. Pseudoscientific theories can't be tested because they're consistent with every imaginable state of affairs in the empirical world. And let's do number 4 as well, since it's so similar. Pseudoscientific theories are so vague that anything relevant can be shoehorned in to fit. Now, does that describe evolution?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Evolutionists are always ready with a story to explain any observed trait in living things. I mean, why do some birds, like peacocks and birds of paradise, have beautiful and elaborate tails? Well, evolutionists explain. If a peacock can find food and evade predators while dragging around a bigger and more conspicuous tail than his rivals do, this demonstrates that he is a particularly strong and capable, and thus makes a better mate. So evolution selects females that prefer males with the most elaborate tails. But the same article also says it's hard to figure what possible advantage these eye-catching but burdensome appendages offer in the grim business of survival. So if peacocks had small, streamlined tails, evolutionists would no doubt be explaining that, well, they're an efficient tail that gives an advantage in the struggle for survival in escaping from predators, for example.
Right, yeah. Evolution is just as good at predicting things that never happened as it is at predicting things that actually did happen. A theory that can explain anything predicts nothing and proves nothing. So evolution definitely fits the characteristics of pseudoscience at points 3 and 4.
Right. So number 5, some theories have been empirically tested, and rather than being confirmed, they seem to have either been falsified or to require numerous ad hoc hypotheses to explain them. Does this describe evolution?
Okay, well, evolutionists are forced to admit that the fossil evidence for their theory is slim to non-existent. There's a handful of examples. For example, almost all major groups of creatures appear in the fossil record with no evolutionary past. The Cambrian explosion is a good example of this. One evolutionist describes it this way: something quite bizarre happened at the end of the Precambrian era. Rocks from that time show evidence of an astounding variety of multi-celled and hard-shelled life forms that seemingly appeared all at once. Scientists have long pondered the causes of this sudden appearance of new life forms, known as the Cambrian explosion.
Right. So the evolutionists offer an ad hoc hypothesis to explain the lack of evidence. One theory is punctuated equilibrium, which says that sometimes evolution happens so fast that there are too few intermediate generations to have much chance of being fossilized. So we can't see evolution happening today because it goes so slowly, and we can't see evidence of it in the past because it happened too quickly.
The fossil record just doesn't reveal the expected transitional fossils. Paleontologists know that things appear suddenly fully formed. That falsifies evolution. But if you just add enough what-if scenarios and assumptions, you can make any observation fit with evolution. So point 5 in the skeptics list of pseudoscience traits certainly describes evolution. Stick around, we'll be back with more.
The Genesis account is the Rolls-Royce of creation books. It's a thorough verse-by-verse analysis of the first 11 chapters of Genesis, revealing what the text means. Unlike most commentaries, it includes the additional step of providing cutting-edge scientific support for the history recorded in Genesis, because its author, Dr. Jonathan Sarfati, is a PhD scientist. Since science confirms the truths in God's Word, if both are properly interpreted, this nearly 800-page book makes a fantastic reference tool for pastors or anyone wanting to know what Genesis really means. Order your copy at creation.com.
On this week's episode, we are comparing evolution to pseudoscience. And we just finished the first 5 in our list so far, and evolution matches all of them.
Yes, it does. Okay, number 6 in the list is: some pseudoscientific theories rely on ancient myths and legends. Now, this is one that doesn't particularly describe evolution. Although evolutionary notions can be traced back long before Darwin to, for example, ancient pagan Greek philosophers like Empedocles, who lived from 490 to 430 BC, but evolution isn't really based on ancient myths.
Right. The modern versions of evolution really became popular as a result of Charles Darwin's book, which was published in November of 1859, and those that he actually plagiarized from.
Yes.
Darwin actually plagiarized some key ideas from creation scientists. We did a show on this last year, and you can watch that on our website at creation.com/CML5-02.
All right, let's move on to number 7. Some pseudoscientific theories are supported mainly by selective use of anecdotes, intuition, and examples of confirming instances. Now, do we have evolutionary examples of that?
Absolutely. Evolutionists try to find animals that fit into their evolutionary tree. In the classic horse story, they arrange a group of animals with similar body shapes in order by size and say that it shows the evolution of the horse. But is this actual ancestry or just just a contrived arrangement. Except for the supposed first horse in the series, which probably doesn't belong in the group at all, the fossils show the wide variation within the created kind is what it actually shows. Most of that variation in the horse kind is still with us today. As the biologist Herbert Nielsen said, the family tree of the horse is beautiful and continuous only in the textbooks.
Only in textbooks, yeah. Most of the creatures that would have had to exist if evolution were true have never been found. And some creatures that have been found don't fit into the evolutionary tree at all, like the platypus. What's it evolving into? A little bit of everything, right? But evolutionists seize on a few creatures that sort of look like they might have been halfway between, going back to the horse series, a badger and a horse, or between a reptile and a bird. But these rare apparent fits then prove evolution as much as the occasional good guess by a psychic can prove that they can read your mind, type of thing.
Right. So we can say that evolution's a good match for criteria number 7.
Yeah.
So number 8 is some pseudoscientific theories confuse metaphysical claims with empirical claims. By the way, metaphysical refers to an abstract thought or subjects like existence, causality, truth.
Okay, all right. So some evolutionists insist that evolution has no metaphysical implications at all. On the Talk Origins website, one evolutionist summarized his article this way: evolution does not have moral consequences and does not make cosmic purpose impossible.
Right, but others make dogmatic metaphysical applications.
Yes.
The American Academy for the Advancement of Science website includes a whole section on science, ethics, and religion with statements like, evolution is the creation myth of our age. By telling us our origins, it shapes our views on what we are. In calling it a myth, I am not saying that it is a false story. I mean that it is great symbolic power, which is independent of its truth. Is the word religion appropriate to it? This depends on the sense in which we understand that very elastic word, and I have chosen it deliberately.
Okay, another example. Richard Dawkins said that Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist.
Right.
Now just think about that statement for a minute. So before Charles Darwin, why was it not possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist?
Right.
It was because the biological changes that Darwin and others saw in living things was promoted as a creative force.
Right.
Now science actually confirms the opposite, by the way, and then it was married to the notion of millions of years.
Right.
In doing so, he invented a pseudo-scientific excuse for all those who want to reject the creator God of the Bible and the accompanying submission to his laws. That's what Dawkins is referring to.
Right. Self-professed atheist Thomas Nagel, a professor of philosophy at New York University, said this: I want atheism to be true, and I am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. It isn't just that I don't believe in God and naturally hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that. Right. So for people like Nagel, Dawkins, and other atheists who don't want there to be a God, it meant that there was a mechanism that could account for the diversity of life without the need for a creator.
Yeah.
So yes, evolution absolutely does make metaphysical claims, and atheism is a metaphysical claim itself, and it's not possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist without believing in evolution.
Yeah. Among all the beliefs that are out there, it's a horrible belief. Beliefs have consequences. Beliefs govern behavior. Dawkins himself said this. He said, we live in a world, in a universe which has no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. That's his belief. And that would certainly influence what he believes about right, wrong, the meaning of life, and so on. And we'll continue with that in just a minute.
Helium gas is renowned for its ability to diffuse through materials quickly. Why is it then that we find an abundance of helium in certain rock crystals, that it has not managed to escape from them? This has significant implications for the dating of rocks using radioactive decay. That's because helium is formed when some radioisotopes decay, and therefore lots of helium suggests lots of decay has occurred. Moreover, if lots of decay has occurred, it also suggests that the rock is very old. However, nuclear physicist Dr. Russell Humphreys realized that lots of helium trapped in the rock crystals that had not had time to diffuse out means that the rocks were actually young. Dr. Humphreys concluded that nuclear decay rates must have been dramatically faster in the recent past, and that is why rocks that are actually only thousands of years old are commonly wrongly dated using radioisotope decay as millions or billions of years old.
To find out more from Creation Ministries International, visit our website, creation.com.
Well, our subject this week is what are some of the characteristics of pseudoscience, and does evolution fit with those characteristics? And so far we've covered 8 of the 10 points, and evolution qualifies as pseudoscience at all points except one.
Right.
Now, we were just talking about the fact that beliefs have consequences, of course, and the consequences of evolution applied to society have been horrendous.
Yeah. We've done shows highlighting some of these things, like communism and Nazism, resulting in about 200 million deaths in the 20th century. Right. The connections between evolution and these ideologies have been well documented. Yep. You can read a section of articles on our website detailing this at creation.com/communism.
Yeah, I mean, it's often been stated that theistic religions have been, the result of wars, loss of life, etc. But theistic religions account for only about 7% of all wars, and that percentage actually drops to about 3% if Islam is removed. But let's move on. Number 9 in the list of criteria of pseudoscience is some pseudoscientific theories contradict known scientific laws and use ad hoc hypothesis to explain their belief.
Okay, well, we did a show on that just a few weeks ago called The Irrational Faith of Evolution. Yeah. It was the first episode of this year's broadcast season. Yeah. Yes, evolution contradicts known scientific laws.
Of course, because we talked about the law of biogenesis, that life comes only from life. Everything that we've ever observed in science supports this basic law of biology. But evolutionists need to believe that this law was broken millions of years ago to fit their scenario.
Right, but they don't see it as the huge problem that it is. They just dismiss it, as one evolutionist writes.
It's only a scientific law, after all.
Yeah, it's only a law. And he writes, did Pasteur prove that no life can ever come from non-living things? No, he didn't. This is because you cannot disprove something like that experimentally.
Right, so the fact that all the experimental evidence of the past 200 years contradicts their theory is irrelevant, because they speculated that it's possible that there's some experiment that no one has tried yet that actually might work. So number 9 on the list definitely fits with evolution.
Okay, number 10, the last one. Pseudoscientists claim to base their theories on empirical evidence that they may even use some scientific methods, though often their understanding of a controlled experiment is inadequate. So, does this final point also describe evolution?
Well, evolutionists claim that their theory is science, but the National Center for Science Education, which is an anti-creationist lobbying group, admits that there's a problem. The failure of many students to understand and accept the fact of evolution is often a consequence of the naive views that they hold of the nature of science. According to this naive view, the key to the unique success of science at producing true knowledge is the scientific method, which on the standard account involves formulating hypotheses, making predictions, and then going into the laboratory to perform the crucial experiment. In contrast, the work of many evolutionary biologists involves the reconstruction of the past. The methods that they use do not conform to the standard view of the scientific method.
We could say a lot of things about that quote.
Wow.
So if you can't actually prove your theory using the scientific method, which actually uses controlled experiments, what do? You simply declare that only naive people think that the scientific method has anything to do with science. Well, what they call science anyways, they mean evolution.
Right. I mean, at least they admit that it involves reconstruction of the past.
Yeah, that's a good admission.
But you can't have it both ways. Either evolution can be tested via the scientific method, then it would be a proper science, or, as is really the case in the origins debate, it's about reconstructing the past, in which case you can't use the scientific method. So evolution fits point number 10.
Right. So out of the 10 characteristics of pseudoscience listed in the Skeptics Dictionary, evolution meets 9. Few other pseudosciences like astrology or astral projection or alien abduction, crystal power, whatever you want, would meet so many of those criteria.
Right. I mean, that's kind of ironic. Evolutionists are constantly talking about how scientific evolution is, and that creation is just a religious belief. Of course, we creationists have been pointing out for years that both of them aren't science. There's a great article summarizing some of this at creation.com/notscience.
And we'll be back to wrap things up in just a minute.
Creation Ministries International staff, many from a wide variety of scientific disciplines, have produced thousands of articles now available in a massive online database. Some of the topics covered include the feasibility of Noah's Ark and evidence for a global flood, scientific arguments that explain observations in astronomy within a young Earth timeframe, recent discoveries that support dinosaurs fitting with biblical history, evidence from biology that shows that the type of change that is observed in living things has absolutely nothing to do with evolution. Got questions? Get answers at creation.com.
Okay, welcome back. We're just going to wrap up the show with a feedback. We often get emails into the website and so on. We'll just share one. We've titled this one, Plant Breeding is Not Evolution. And someone wrote in, recently I've come across several articles on plant evolution that report how many modern crops we consume today were once inedible grass in the past, and that they were evolved through genetic mutation and artificial selection to produce the edible foodstuffs. While I don't believe any of these claims support the theory of evolution, I've also seen people use these reports to attack creation because apparently the original world could not have been very good if man was forced to rely on these lucky mutations to obtain the staples that we need to survive. So, interesting feedback.
Yeah, and I mean, the show today, we were talking about the fact that we're talking about evolution as molecules to man. We obviously natural selection, genetic mutation. These are real things that we observe in biology,
but
they
define
just
these terms.
Yeah, they just don't evolve anything. So, actually, Dr. Don Batten, our CEO of CMI Australia, a PhD in biology himself. He answered back. I'm just going to read one key section here. He said, I have no problem with the concept that mankind has selected and developed various crop foods to make them nicer to eat or easier to cultivate, but sometimes not as nutritious or healthy, he points out. This has nothing to do with evolution, as there is no evidence that the processes involved the natural addition of new genetic information. I mean, this is the key that evolution needs, new genetic information. New genetic information to the species involved. Mutations are the only game in town for the evolutionist to achieve this, and they are clearly not up to the job. And he actually references a section of our website to see mutation questions and answers on our website.
Q&A page.
Yeah. The natural processes of mutation and natural or artificial selection, because that's what's actually referenced here is artificial selection, do not add new biochemical pathways to living things. So time and time again, this is what you see in the news media. Reports coming out, we've observed evolution in action. Now what's so interesting is how can they be observing evolution in action when the show we just did referenced the National Academy of Sciences admitting that they've never seen evolution. So there's this shell game going on here where from the evolutionary camp, we're hearing both things.
Evolution means different things, right?
Right.
When we say evolution, we mean molecules to man. When they mean evolution, it's synonymous with natural selection in some cases. Next week, what about mammoths? We'll see you next week on Creation Magazine Live.